Consider this. You strive to blend in throughout your life, making yourself into what you want to be, based on standards that aren't even your own. You want approval and are afraid of being judged, and maintain the belief that your value is determined by the way other people view you. However, what if what you've been told about? In fact, caring too much is preventing you from moving forward. What if the secret to genuine joy, being in control of everything, does not equate to confidence and success? However, Michel de Montaigne was let go, an intellectual who was centuries ahead of his time. Examine this conundrum in great detail. His ideas serve as a manual for achieving inner liberation, acceptance of oneself, as well as the skill of living without needless burdens. He questioned the fundamental premises of our beliefs regarding societal constraints and identity achievement. And at the conclusion of this trip, you'll see why. The instant you give up on seeking approval from others, everything in your life begins to come together. Consider how much stress you are under, and striving to live up to expectations causes frustration that are not even yours. How frequently do you put yourself last due to your fear of being evaluated? How much of your one expends energy fretting about issues that have less significance in the great scheme of things? The philosophy of Montaigne reveals a straightforward but potent reality. The more we release ourselves from outside forces, the more we conform to our true selves. According to him, life is unpredictable, that the idea of perfection is deceptive, and that the greatest kind of wisdom is self-acceptance. However, most people make a mistake here. Being indifferent does not equate to not caring, indolent or lacking motivation. It does not imply a retreat from life or neglecting obligations. It entails releasing yourself from the ongoing requirement for acceptance, the fear of being rejected, and the tiresome tendency to overanalyze every action. It entails living according to your own rules, being in the present, and realizing that you don't need to demonstrate anything to anybody. For a large portion of his life, Montaigne thought about the characteristics of human conduct. He noted that individuals are frequently captives of their own thoughts, trapped in never-ending worry cycles, insecurity and self-doubt. Fifth, why we let other people's viewpoints influence, why we cling to power over our decisions. When life is unpredictable by nature, why we strive for success. Not only is that not ours, but most significantly, he inquired as to what might occur if we just stopped giving these things any thought. When you give up trying to be flawless, you start to accept your imperfections. When you no longer care about approval from others, you begin to live for yourself. When you quit attempting to manage everything, you create room for life to develop organically. And now for the conundrum. The less you're concerned with establishing yourself, the more powerful you get. Consider the most assured people of charisma that you've encountered. Are they the ones that are always looking for approval, excessive self-explanation, and attempting to win everyone over? Or do they appear to be more relaxed, unconcerned about little concerns, and unreservedly themselves? Montaigne was aware of this secret long before it was validated by contemporary psychology. Authenticity attracts people. When you quit looking for approval, when you believe in yourself and accept your flaws, you get more appealing by nature, not only in social situations but in all facets of life. The instant you stop being afraid of failing or condemnation, you acquire something even more worthwhile: freedom to take chances without worrying too much, the unrestricted ability to express oneself, the liberty to merely be, without continuously evaluating your value according to outside norms. However, this is where it becomes really intriguing. After letting rid of unneeded concerns, you not only discover tranquility, but your life genuinely begins to become better. Connections become more sincere. Chances present themselves organically. Making decisions is made simpler, since they are founded on your actual desires, not what you believe you ought to desire. This is what Montaigne's philosophy is all about. If you thought that the majority of our misery results from our denial of reality, from attempting to fit life into an unsuitable mold. However, if you let go of that resistance, everything starts to line up. Consider this. How often have you been afraid to voice your opinions? Due to your fear of what other people will think. How frequently do you mentally relive conversations concerning yourself with how you were seen? To what extent has your life been influenced by anticipations that were never? Montaigne extends an invitation to leave these self-imposed restrictions alone. He urges us to welcome ambiguity, to put up with flaws, and to cease letting fear control our decisions. And this is only the first step, because as we examine his philosophy in greater detail, we'll find useful methods to use this way of thinking in your daily life. Techniques that assist you in overcoming mental obstacles. Make choices with assurance, and have a genuine experience. The liberty that results with relinquishing. The philosophy of de Montaigne is not merely a theoretical concept. It is a useful manual for changing your perspective on life. And we go one step further now. What occurs when you fully adopt this way of thinking? What happens if you give up seeking approval, worrying about every scenario that could happen, and letting fear control your behavior? Imagine waking up one day, recognizing that the majority of the burdens you're carrying were never authentic in the first place, that you have been abiding by the regulations, the standards you've been attempting to fulfill, and the worries that have paralyzed you. We are all socially constructed illusions, conditioning as well as your personal thoughts. Realize that people are inherently nervous. We overthink everything all the time, attempting to forecast the future, and battling the unknown. However, what if the secret to contentment is not in every problem's solution? However, in accepting the reality that some things are just beyond our control. This is among Montaigne's most potent teachings. The world will never comprehend you completely, and that's totally acceptable. Consider how frequently we waste energy attempting to provide an explanation for ourselves, defend our decisions, can demonstrate our value to those who might never actually see us. To prevent controversy, we keep our actual opinions to ourselves. To blend in, we repress our true desires. We search for approval from others all the time, when in fact, our own approval is the only one that really counts. According to Montaigne, a large portion of human sorrow originates from too much concern about things that don't benefit us. He saw how people knotted themselves over trivial issues and harboring resentment, phobias and anxieties that eventually make their lives worthless. But when you take a step back, you understand. Believe the majority of these concerns are unimportant, considering everything in its entirety. Have you ever observed that when you cease worrying about a problem, naturally a solution emerges? Implies that once you give up trying to get someone's attention, all of a sudden, they show greater attention. This isn't a coincidence. It reflects a more profound reality. Life flows when you let go. The issue is that most people oppose this notion. They think that if they lose interest, they'll become less motivated. That giving up entails letting go. However, this is a miscommunication. Apathy is not the same as not caring. It doesn't imply being lazy. It entails turning your attention to what really counts and releasing yourself from the burden of needless burdens. Montaigne urged us to accept our flaws, not only in ourselves but also in the environment we live in. He recognized that aiming for total authority is a never-ending, grueling battle. Life is not always predictable, and despite our best efforts to plan, prepare, or control results, things that are out of our grasp will always exist. So why not accept this reality? Why not acknowledge your mistakes? Uncertainties and failures are just a part of life. Think about how much lighter you'd feel if you gave up attempting to exert authority every aspect of your existence, if you stopped obsessively reviewing each choice, if you no longer feared failing, and instead considered it to be merely another phase of your trip. We are reminded by Montaigne that all great thinkers throughout history, leaders and artists have experienced failure, denial and misinterpretation. However, they refused to let these things define them. They took a step ahead, unconcerned about what the crowd thinks, since they comprehended. Because seeking approval from others does not lead to actual success. It can be found in leading a genuine life. And this is where things become even more intriguing. When you embrace this way of thinking, people start to notice your increased self-assurance, more captivating and in charge of your own life. Not because you're trying to make something happen, but since you're not wasting any more, putting effort into things that don't benefit you. Have you ever pondered why some people appear to succeed easily, while others, despite their tireless efforts, suffer? Talent isn't always the difference. Intelligence or even diligence. Those that flourish have this mindset. Recognize that disengagement from pointless concerns enables them to concentrate on what really matters. According to Montaigne's teaching, the more we let go, the more we benefit from letting go of our fear of failing. When we stop trying to get approval, we take greater chances. We grow more genuine. When we give up attempting to manage everything, we make room for unforeseen opportunities to present themselves. For this reason, the non-caring ideology, when used properly, it doesn't mean giving up, but about becoming free. It involves deciding where to focus your efforts, concentrating solely on what adds significance, and refusing to let distractions hold you back. Things didn't really add anything to your life. Take a time to reflect on your own life. How much of your anxiety is caused by concerns about what others believe? How often have you been hesitant to go after something you genuinely desired because you were worried about being judged? How frequently do you mentally relive prior errors, as though self-punishment will somehow transform them? The method used by Montaigne breaks us free from these mental restraints. He serves as a reminder that the past is over, the future is unclear, and the current moment is the only thing we actually own. And when you accept this truth in its entirety, everything starts to change. However, there is still more to learn, because the following section will examine a startling realization: how detachment doesn't result in isolation, genuinely produces deeper and deeper relationships with other people. In life, there is an odd paradox. When you no longer require something, it frequently comes to you naturally. When you quit seeking acceptance, when you stop being afraid of failing, people will appreciate you more. There are opportunities, as well as when you give up attempting to manage everything. Life starts to unfold in unexpected ways. Among the most important teachings in Montaigne's detachment from philosophy is not an escape route. It is a route to more profound fulfillment. By relinquishing the need to impose results, you give yourself over to life's organic rhythm. And in doing so, you start to feel something genuinely amazing, a feeling of harmony, strength, and unity. However, the question is whether detachment is really that effective. Why do most individuals find it difficult to accept it? The response is straightforward: because we've been led to believe that authority is equivalent to security. We've been told that if we put in enough effort, make enough plans, and stress about it sufficiently, the world is ours to mold as we see fit. However, Montaigne warns us that this is a fake. Uncertainty cannot be eradicated by control. No amount of preparation can shield against unforeseen circumstances. And reality cannot be altered by concern, rather than opposing life. He asks us to accept it for what it is, with all of its uncertainty. Consider your relationships in light of imperfection and disorder. How frequently do unfulfilled expectations lead to conflicts? How much pain is brought on by the want to influence others to behave in a particular manner? How frequently do we attempt to regulate opinions, other people's behaviors and feelings, only to become frustrated? Montaigne was let down or injured, realized that genuine relationship isn't about dominance. It has to do with accepting. The more you let people be who they are, without attempting to alter them, or make them live up to your standards, the more sincere and profound your connections get. This is the reason why detachment practitioners frequently feel more love, admiration, and respect. They avoid making demands that suffocate other people. Unlike anticipations, they don't require continual assurance. They just live in a condition of serene assurance, letting people come and leave as they choose. And paradoxically, this enhances their beauty. More esteemed and appreciated. Have you ever observed that? The individuals who are most in need of attention frequently get the least amount of it. Additionally, people who are content with themselves innately attract others. The power of letting go is this. According to Montaigne, our interactions with other people is a clear representation of how we relate to ourselves. If we're always looking for approval, it indicates that we still don't fully accept who we are. Fearing solitude indicates we still don't feel at ease in our own company. If we require specific behaviors from others in order to feel safe, it indicates that we haven't developed our own internal stability. However, the instant you turn your attention inside, when you quit attempting to manipulate others, when loneliness no longer scares you, when you cease taking measurements, your value according to outside norms, when you consider it, you become genuinely free. How much of your emotional energy do you have is devoted to responding to other people's comments and deeds? How frequently do you allow the opinions of others to influence you? How many times have you harbored animosity during your day, disappointment or rage, only to discover afterwards that it was useless? We learn from Montaigne that inner tranquility comes from inside, not from other people's approval. And after you comprehend this, your whole way of living shifts. Imagine navigating the world without being fazed by criticism. Imagine not being afraid to face uncertainty. Imagine having the capacity to love and value others, without attempting to exert influence on them. When you pause, this is what occurs. Caring about things that aren't really important. And here is the most crucial section. Letting go doesn't imply giving up on life. It does not imply a lack of feeling or indifference. It entails completely interacting with the world, but without connection and needless concern, and without having to coerce results. The idea behind Montaigne's concept is equilibrium. It has to do with caring, thinking carefully about what really matters, your principles and your goals, your inner tranquility, while letting go of the things that sap your vitality. They have no actual function. Thus, ask yourself, what are you clinging to that doesn't benefit you anymore? What is expected? You're burdened by attachments or fears, and the consequences of just letting them go. As we proceed to the last leg of this adventure, we'll discover the final insight. Why it's important to embrace uncertainty. Because inner serenity is not the only result of detachment, but also to a more meaningful life. Achievement and contentment at this stage. Perhaps you're wondering why letting go is so effective. Why don't more individuals adopt it? Why are so many people still stuck in the perpetual loop of control, approval-seeking and worry? Fear of the unknown is the response. Fear of failing, fear of what could occur. If we quit controlling every part of our life on a micro level, we've been conditioned by society to think that if we let go, everything will collapse. However, the reality is that when you quit, considering the things that aren't important, everything comes together. Being careless is not central to Montaigne's ideology. It has to do with wisdom. By letting go of unneeded concerns, he teaches us. By relinquishing control, we acquire clarity. We become free and embrace ambiguity. We acquire a more meaningful and fulfilled existence. Consider the best times in your life. The moments that were most important. Were they meticulously planned out? Or did they occur on their own, unexpectedly? Some of life's most exquisite things. Love, inspiration cannot be coerced. Inventiveness and even achievement. They frequently appear after you give up pursuing them, when you make room for them to emerge organically. Think about the artist who isn't concerned about if their work will be approved by the world, and consequently produce something genuinely remarkable. The businessperson who no longer fears failure, takes daring chances, and ultimately transforms a whole industry. The one who quits frantically seeking love, and in that area of accepting oneself, meets the appropriate person with ease. This is life's conundrum. Things that you cling to too strongly tend to disappear. However, you typically get back what you give up, in more ways than you could have ever dreamed. Montaigne reminds us that life shouldn't be difficult. Indeed, there will be difficulties, obstacles and ambiguities, but opposing them, and worrying about them simply makes us more miserable. Rather, he urges us to embrace life, to acknowledge its flaws, to chuckle at its ridiculousness, and to be happy despite the chaos. Since this is the final insight, to be happy, you don't have to have complete control. You don't have to convince anyone of anything. You don't have to be afraid of the unknown, due to the uncertainty of life itself. And it's lovely because of that. When you no longer care about approval from others, you get genuine self-assurance. When you no longer fear failure, you become unstoppable. When you quit attempting to manage every single detail, you make room for magic to occur. And Montaigne realized that ages ago. Attempting to conquer life is not a sign of wisdom. However, after learning to move with it. Thus, as you proceed, ask yourself, today, what can you let go of? What extra burden have you been bearing that no longer works for you? And how would you describe your life if you just had faith that everything would work itself out? Because when you quit caring about things that don't matter to you, the appropriate things come your way. And it is the real strength of Montaigne's theory. I appreciate you looking.